agenda today. Oh, thanks, Melinda.
Yeah.
All right. Hearing none, let's start going over the minutes for September 15th.
Okay. All right. Everybody see the minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Melinda. It looks like we have a quorum. Are there any comments on the minutes of September 15th? I just wanted to mention one thing since we have a couple minutes, and that is that the invasive work party that I led at Catamount Community Forest. We had 7 people total, including me. I thought it was interesting, though, that one person who came was very excited because she had been out with Ethan Tapper and she had her own buckthorn blasters ready to work on getting rid of buckthorn and honeysuckle. And I made it clear that, people could only use it on their own properties, or if they were with a licensed or certified herbicide applicator, which was myself. And one person who lives backed up to the Talcott Forest said, "Oh, but these are invasives and I walk a trail through that forest all the time. That's kind of like my trail. I can take out those buckthorn, right?" And I said, "No, it's illegal." She said, "Yeah, but what's wrong with that?" And I said, "Well, because it's a forest owned by UVM, there could be some studies going on in there, and you just don't know what you're messing up. You don't know if there's a plot where people are letting things just grow, or a plot, that has different treatments. So you really can't go messing around in the Talcott Forest or anywhere in Williston." So anyway, I just thought that was an interesting story to let you know about, that I had to really shut people down from going rogue in Williston with their buckthorn blasters. So
Laura,
yeah.
can you hear me? It's Gary. I just had another related comment. I think in general, despite the fact of needing a licensed person around, you shouldn't be impacting somebody else's forest in general without asking permission. I
Right.
mean, cutting or cutting trails, anything, even going on there, unless you know it's okay to go on there, you should ask permission.
Totally agree. And the reason I mentioned it is because some people feel like they have ownership over these trails that they use, even if they're not on their own property. It's an interesting phenomenon. Yep. One that
just-
maybe, yeah.
I just had Pat Poulin from Vast email me about a huge buckthorn on our property, and he did ask for permission and to go ahead and cut that one.
Oh, that's great. Are you going to treat it for him?
He's going to mark it, and I'm going to treat it.
Okay, great. Yeah, because he asked me to remove and treat a couple that are up on the Smoker Trail, and we do have permission from the landowner. So,
Oh, good.
all right. So, okay, back to the minutes. Anyone have any comments about the minutes? Okay, hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion. to
Okay,
approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
all right, thanks, Terry. I hear a motion and a second. Any other further comment? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes of September 15th signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the minutes have been approved. All right, so we can go on.
Laura,
to-
I'm abstaining, just so you know, because I wasn't there.
Oh, yeah. Thanks,
And
Reed.
since you have a quorum otherwise. Yep.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Reed. All right, Melinda, can we go on to the two-lot subdivision?
Sure. Let's see. Yeah, here it is.
Is there someone here speaking to that subdivision?
Good morning, Laura. My name is Kevin Mazuzin. I've submitted the application and I'm the property owner.
Okay, great, Kevin. Nice to meet you. Would you like to speak before we go over what the Conservation Commission has written up?
No, I'm comfortable with what Melinda had provided already, so I'd rather just go ahead and go through the document, and if there's any questions, because I think it's pretty straightforward at this point.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kevin. Okay, Melinda, let's go through the document, and when we get to findings, we can stop. If anybody has any comment as we go through. This is a two-lot subdivision on Butternut Road.
Yeah, so the parcel is a little over 5 acres, contains one single-family home and served by on-site septic, and is currently accessed by a driveway off Butternut Road. And the applicant's proposing to subdivide the parcel to add one additional dwelling unit. He received growth management allocation for one dwelling unit in March 2020. Because the parcel is less than 10.5 acres, it's not subject to Williston's open space protection provision. So the new lot would share a driveway with the existing. The driveway is proposed to be relocated a little bit down the road from the existing one, roughly coinciding with a power line easement. And there's an existing Howard right-of-way that will remain in place. So at pre-application, you made a couple of recommendations. One, that a habitat disturbance assessment be conducted, which the applicant has submitted, and also that the discretionary permit application be accompanied by a completed runoff and erosion control checklist. And the applicant has gone beyond that and submitted an erosion prevention and sediment control plan. So mainly the impacts to the impacts from the development are that it's in a significant wildlife habitat area, and that's in a scenic viewshed area. So the habitat disturbance assessment was conducted on May 8th of 2020 and revised on September 23rd, 2021. It does conclude that the proposed project will not have an undue adverse impact to the significant wildlife habitat area, and proposes some recommendations to reduce that impact. And then it is in the scenic viewshed area. Looks like from the site plan that the proposed new home will be not be very visible from the road. So that mitigates the impact to the viewshed area. There are no wetlands or streams on the property. There are some steep slopes. The proposed driveway and the new home will by and large avoid any slopes over 15%. And the applicant has submitted an erosion prevention and sediment control plan. So the recommendations are pretty simple. Basically, and these are recommendations that I developed sort of outside of the habitat disturbance assessment. The recommendations in the habitat disturbance assessment are also good recommendations, but they're not really things that the town can enforce and not really actionable items that the DRB can condition. They were things like avoiding use of pesticides, putting up some bird nest boxes, and that kind of thing. So that's great for the homeowner to keep that in mind. And, you know, if Kevin can adopt some of those practices, you know, that would be great. These recommendations are more recommendations for the DRB to consider adopting as conditions, limiting the extent of forest clearing to the degree possible, and then having the final plans show building envelopes on lots 1 and lot 2. You'll notice if you look at the site plan that there aren't any real building envelopes except for showing the 15-foot setbacks. So that's a recommendation to limit any impact from clearing or building structures. And typically when building envelopes are shown on a final plan, what that means is that that's the area that structures can be built. That's the area that can be cleared. And outside of that area, you can't have any clearing or build any structures. And then the last recommendation is that at the time the proposed new shared driveway is completed and operational, the existing driveway serving lot 1 be abandoned and restored to a forested condition. So some sort of restoration to restore habitat so that there aren't 2 driveways still remaining. So those are my recommendations. If you'd like to look at the site plan, I can put that up for you. Otherwise, you can feel free to discuss the recommendations.
Kevin, do you have any comments on the recommendations?
Yes, thank you, Laura. I really appreciate Melinda's thoughtful approach to this project. I'm committed to implementing the mitigation recommendations in the wildlife disturbance assessment that was completed for the project. even though it's not something really that the DRB can add as a condition. But I appreciate those mitigation recommendations first and foremost. Also, the recommendations that she provided seem to be very, very agreeable to the idea behind the whole project and really trying to be as little of impact as possible on the habitat and the neighborhood. Limiting forest clearing, we've tried to utilize some area that's already been disturbed by previous development. So the easement for the electrical lines that are up, clearly pointing out those 2 building envelopes is something that we would do in the final plan. And the third one, returning that driveway and abandoning it, restoring it to forested condition is something relatively simple that we're very pleased to be able to do. And as we continue the battle against the buckthorn, hopefully native plants and native habitat will be restored by us just removing a lot of that buckthorn on the property. It's a never-ending battle, as I'm sure you're well aware. So that's all I've got at this point. Oh, and the runoff and erosion control plan. Yeah, we discussed the project with Emily during the pandemic and chose to go with the control plan at this point, just to make it very clear, because there were some steep slopes and we wanted to make sure that we took into consideration that runoff. And since then, we've also taken advantage of the blue opportunity that Williston residents had, and we had our property looked at, and there were some recommendations around preventing additional runoff. So we're excited about the opportunity that we have to be very thoughtful and look forward to your decision.
Any further comments by the commission?
Yeah, I've got one comment for Melinda. The approval date is should be 2021, not 2020. And then a
Yes,
question.
thank you.
Question for Kevin. What are the plans for water and sewer for lot 2?
Yes. Hi, good morning, Carl. We have an approved wastewater disposal for both parcels. Actually, the state required us to create a backup plan for the existing home. So that's been approved by the state. And the new dwelling unit has been designed as a Presby unit, which is a gravity-fed wastewater system. And the water will be a private drilled well in the corner of the property. And the existing property has a private drilled well as well. So they'll be very separate. And the idea behind the Presby unit is we're looking to build a net zero or a passive home on this parcel.
Thank you.
It's just a question about the wildlife assessment report, and it said that Trudell was the one who conducted it. And I was just curious, do they have a biologist on their?
Yeah, they do. Brittany LeBleu and Andrea Dottolo are both ecologists, and they were the ones that performed this. Brittany actually came to the property and spent a day here on the property to do the initial assessment. Since that was done, she's left TCE, and Andrea went in and clarified some questions that we had in regards to impact. But both of them had their insight and input in the habitat disturbance assessment.
Okay, and is Trudell this project of building the house, or is this just what they just did the report?
Trudell did all of our wastewater treatment planning. They did our erosion control plan. They did this. I use them kind of as a la carte in that I really had my hands in on the whole process and the application and the narrative and everything that I've submitted to the town. So they were consultants to me and provided the things that I needed as subject matter expert to provide.
Thank you.
Any further comments on this discretionary permit? Hearing none, it looks pretty straightforward. And Kevin, thank you for being so thoughtful in how you're subdividing this. Do I have a motion to approve this discretionary permit?
I'll move approval of the recommendations for the discretionary permit.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay, the recommendations for this discretionary permit have been approved. Thank you, Kevin. And if you would, this is just something completely different, but I have a bunch of buckthorn blasters. So if you want any, I can give you one. I can drop one off.
Laura, yeah, I'd appreciate that. That's wonderful. And thank you to you and thank you to the committee. I appreciate your efforts here.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we're a little bit ahead of time, but that's okay. Is everyone here that needs to be here for the State of Vermont Public Safety Facility Site Plan Review?
I think so.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right.
And just to clarify, because there's a bunch of people here and I kind of want to know who's here for the public safety versus who's here just as the public. So if you could just state everybody's name who's here representing the state of Vermont, I would appreciate it.
So this is Zoli Horvath. I'm the BGS project manager for the Williston Public Safety. Scott Homestead is our civil engineer.
That's me. Hello.
Marty Sinkwich with SAS Architects. And Jeremy Stevens is my boss.
Good morning. Nice to see you again.
And Captain Mike Manley with Vermont State Police. That's our team. Did I miss anyone? Is Sherry here, Marty, or?
No, she's not here today.
Okay. So
okay, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is there anyone else here that is not here for the public safety facility that is not on the commission?
I think just Reed Willis.
Okay,
Yeah.
Great. All right, so would Melinda, what's the best way to do this? Would you like to?
Yeah, why don't, if the applicant could go ahead and go over your project, that would be helpful.
Scott, you want to take that lead?
Sure, I can take this one today. So the project has changed a little bit from when we saw you for pre-application in 2019, but the general intent and structure of it is the same. We're proposing the new Williston Public Safety Building, police barracks, and 911 call center, and so forth as the main building, which is what you see in the cover sheet here. And then in the background of this sheet is also a new storage building. Our original application had 2 storage buildings. One of those has at least been temporarily removed and is not proposed for approval at this time. as part of the project, there'll be a public parking lot to the south at the bottom of the page we are looking at here. And then the parking lot to the north is the employee parking lot, which will be a secured lot with a fence and gate. And then there's, circulation and vehicle storage and equipment storage to the west, all around the storage building. The project can be served by municipal water and sewer. We have, for stormwater management, we've designed 2 gravel wetlands to treat runoff. It'll be completely in compliance with the 2017 Vermont State Stormwater Manual. It's been submitted to Christine Doherty for her review at the town. I haven't seen any comments from her yet. We've prepared a complete set of erosion prevention and sediment control plans and details as part of this set. Those were also submitted as our part of our discretionary permit application and will be used to submit for a state of Vermont construction permit. In terms of environmental resources, there's a stream and wetlands complex to the west. We're staying completely out of that. There's no class 2 wetland or wetland buffer disturbance. There's a small stream running just off the property to the south of the project that has an associated buffer with it, which we did actually tweak our plan to completely avoid. We shifted the storage building and the associated parking slightly to the north to get out of that buffer and preserve it entirely. There are some other class 3 wetlands that are labeled on the plans that were determined by our wetlands consultant and the state wetlands ecologist to be basically non-important functioning wetlands. There is one where we are, basically sort of replacing it with a better wetland, where the gravel wetland 1 is off to the west for stormwater treatment. But the other ones we are avoiding. Those are basically big thickets of invasive species, and both our consultant and the state ecologist, just thought while they were technically class 3 wetlands, they're basically miserable things that no one cared about. We did have Arrowwood Environmental perform a wildlife habitat assessment of the site. Their findings were basically what I would call clean. Didn't find anything significant that would be affected by the project. I think those are probably the high points as it relates to the stuff you guys are interested in. I don't know if Zoe or Marty have anything I forgot they wanted to bring up, or I think we'd open it up to the comments and recommendations from the report.
Hi, Marty Sienkiewicz from SAS Architects. Just one other comment after listening to all of the invasive buckthorn talk this morning. One of the things that we are doing is removing invasives from the area of the site where the project is, and we are re-landscaping in accordance with the bylaws.
I have nothing more to add. Thanks, Marty.
All right, Melinda, when you're ready, I think we can go to the recommendations in our report.
Okay. Yeah, so first of all, at pre-app, the WCC had several recommendations. Number 1, providing an easement for a trail from the existing trail easement east to Route 2A to connect to a future sidewalk or paved path. For various reasons, the applicant is not able to provide a trail easement in that location at this time. I think because of the complexities of state government and the different divisions and so on, it would sort of be a trail easement might be granted, but under a different division. So it's not really possible for general services or buildings and general services to provide that permission at this time, but they did indicate their willingness to facilitate a future trail easement in a different area of the parcel, sort of to the west of all the development. Then as far as all the other recommendations, existing Class 2 wetlands and associated buffers must remain in natural vegetation and clearly demarcated on the site plan. And then the applicant's erosion prevention sediment control plan provides details on the protection of the Class 2 wetlands during construction, and that the entire facility is going to be fenced along the perimeter, essentially blocking access to the Class 2 wetlands in the forested portion of the parcel. And then we already talked about the erosion prevention sediment control plan. And the habitat disturbance assessment was submitted. And then the WCC stated that even though the chapter on the Gateway Zoning District South requires structured parking, the Conservation Commission felt that this requirement is not really appropriate for this site and conflicts with the intent of the chapter to sort of absorb the development into the hillside. So they just felt that increasing the height of the buildings with structured parking was sort of conflicting with trying to blend the development into the hillside. So, and they're not proposing structured parking. And then there was a recommendation of pre-app to use porous pavement for surface parking and other impervious surfaces. And the applicant has stated that the use of porous pavement is not feasible due to the nature of the soils. And then the landscaping plan, the applicant has provided a landscaping plan that complies with the landscaping chapter 23 and chapter 34, the Gateway Zoning District South. So we'll go down to the recommendations. So recommendations, applicant will work with the Conservation Commission to provide a trail easement. So I guess to the degree possible, even though that, even though the applicant has indicated that it's not open to the DRB conditioning this, they have at least verbally committed to working with the town to secure a future trail easement. And then, okay, so the second recommendation just states that the applicant's erosion prevention sediment control plan complies with the standards of chapter 29. Watershed protection buffers must remain in natural vegetation and must be clearly demarcated on the site plan. The proposed
Quick question, Melinda.
Yes.
Should recommendation 2 be a finding? Is that a statement, or is that a recommendation that a condition of approval that we recommend the DRB have?
I guess like it really is more a conclusion of law, but since we don't generally have conclusions of law in our in our reports, I've just concluded. I mean, I guess
Okay.
it doesn't really have to be there at all, but it's just a statement.
Okay.
And same with 4. Maybe it doesn't even need to be there. And then 5, invasive species management is strongly recommended within the project envelope to improve conditions and protect and encourage native vegetation. Sounds like they're doing that. And then this number 6 came out of the habitat disturbance assessment. Any lighting within the proposed project limits should be shielded and directed away from the forested area to the west to avoid unnecessary light disturbance of the forested areas. So
I guess, yeah, I would like to see, just for clarity, yeah, I would prefer to see 2 and 4 stated elsewhere in the the write-up and not as a recommendation. I just don't want it to distract from anything that we do put in the recommendations that we want the DRB to focus on.
Is there any reason to not move them to findings?
Yeah, I could do that.
If you're amenable, that seems like the best place I can think of.
Well, another way to look at that is we could say an erosion prevention and sediment control plan is required as a recommendation, and then, it immediately is completed. I mean, they are recommendations that have been completed, but they still could be included as recommendations.
Sure. Yep, that would be fine too if we reworded it.
Or the applicant's erosion prevention and sediment control plan should be implemented as written. And then same thing with the landscaping plan, like they comply, we're great, they're great, we want to see them implemented.
Yeah, I guess we've never done it that way before though, Kim. I mean, all we do is require them and assume they're completed as designed. I don't know.
Do you prefer one of those approaches, Melinda, from a staffing perspective, which you think would be most effective?
I guess, I mean, it doesn't really matter. Whatever you prefer to do, you could either just change it to the erosion prevention sediment control plan needs to comply with the standards of Chapter 29, which it does, and the landscaping plan must comply with chapters 23 and 34. You could either do that, or you could strike them, or you could just move them as written into the findings. It doesn't really matter.
Can I just weigh in a sec? From the applicant point of view, it's very nice to have the clarity in the findings or recommendations that the Conservation Commission is saying that these plans are good.
Mhm.
So I think that provides a lot of clarity to the DRB.
Yeah,
Well,
I'd like
I
to
don't
see
know
them in the findings then, personally.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if this claims they're good. I mean, it claims they're completed.
But it says it
I
meets the
think-
requirements.
Yeah, I think that's a better way to do it. And it's also to show somebody else in the future, here's what the recommendations were. And, just check them off as you guys complete them. I think that's what we've done in the past. It just happens that you've got them completed at the same time we're recommending them.
I think I'm okay with any of those solutions, so long as it's clear that, so I don't think we should strike it. I think making it clear that it has been done and that it complies as is.
So it sounds like if I just move those into the findings, that will satisfy the concerns. If I move number 2 and number 4 up into the findings.
That works for me.
Yep.
You okay with that, Gary?
Yeah, I don't like it, as well as just saying, here's our recommendation, and they can check it off.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think Gary has a point also. Maybe we can write them as recommendations, but just state that these have been complied with. Reed, is that okay? Or do you still think they would be better in findings?
That's what it says now, or what you just said.
I know.
Exactly what it
That's
says
true.
now.
Yeah,
Sorry, I guess I just don't understand why that, like, recommendation number 2 can't just change the complies to should comply with.
Yep, that's
Done.
what Laura and Gary are suggesting.
Yeah.
That's good with you too, Eric. Just changing the language.
But do we need to, I guess then the question for me is, does that signal to the DRB that the current plans do not comply and that they need to be amended to comply? Like, I think we need to like give some indication that the current plans comply.
Yeah, I agree. If you say the applicant's erosion prevention sediment control plan should comply with the standards of chapter 29, this has been completed, or something right after that, and does comply, then that answers that question.
Yeah, great.
I'm good with that, Laura. Thank you for suggesting that.
Yeah.
And sorry for the semantics, everybody. Just trying to make sure we're providing clear feedback for the DRB.
Yeah, yeah, I do think Gary had a good point, and I think it's clear that there is no question that they should have a erosion prevention and sediment control plan, and that it has been complied with, so that they know. I just had a quick question about lighting that probably doesn't directly have to do with this permit, but and maybe this is for the architect. Lighting should be shielded and directed away from the forested area, because lights do disturb insects and animals. And I just wondered if people in general think about, where appropriate, motion detector lights instead of having lights on all the time.
Well, Laura, actually, our bylaw does require motion detector lights for any security lighting, rather than having the lights on all the time. However, that being said, the state has a partial exemption from our bylaws. So they, the burden of proof is on them to show why the lights need to be on all the time, if that really needs to happen. But if that's really the way that they're going to be able to, I guess, realize the property's intended use, then they are allowed an exemption. And so at the end of the day, if they show that having lights on a motion detector will interfere with the intended use, then they're probably going to be allowed to have the lights on all the time. But the burden, like I said, the burden proof is on them to prove that. But normally, if it was another applicant and not the state that has this partial exemption from local bylaws, the town would not allow lights on 24/7. We would require motion detected lights.
Thank you, Melinda. I didn't know that. That's fantastic. Thank you.
And there are types of lights that the applicant can use that focuses the light down to the ground as opposed to spreading out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a requirement too, I assume.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I
okay.
got a question about the watershed protection buffers. It seems like we're not being as specific in this recommendation as we are in others. I mean, usually we're really clear that during construction, there's no impingement on the watershed protection buffers, and we spend a fair bit of time how you're going to demarcate this areas. And then I had a question related to natural vegetation. Does that mean, like, what does natural vegetation mean? Is that just native plants, or is it just whatever comes in, or what?
So Gary, this language is right out of the bylaw. It just says it must remain in natural vegetation. So
Okay.
I'm taking that to mean native vegetation.
Because they're two separate things.
Yeah, I understand. And maybe we want to consider changing the language in bylaw so it's clearer.
Right.
You could change the word natural here to native vegetation. And as I think, if it sounds like what you might be referring to regarding the demarcation is demarcation on the ground. And in this case, there's security fencing around the entire development. So there's no opportunity for people to access the wetlands.
But there is opportunity for the state or whoever mows it to, push down into those and stuff. And that's the main reason to have those on the ground is to,
Right. But in this case, there's a fence around the entire property and they're not going to be doing anything around outside of the fence. Am I correct? Can
I'm
somebody
seeing
speak
some
to that?
nodding.
Okay.
So there's a fence demarcating the wetland buffer area? Is that what
There's
you
a
mean?
fence around the entire developed area of the project and none of it is within the watershed protection buffer.
So that still doesn't protect the buffer though, Melinda. You see what I mean? I mean, we have something on the ground showing where the buffer is. In most cases, we require that. And-
Right, but what I'm saying is that in this case, there's a security fencing around the entire developed area. So there's not going to be any access to the area where the wetlands are. So I guess
Right,
I'm not really sure what the purpose of.
I can imagine there'd be some mowing of the lawn or
Yeah.
whatever outside the security fencing. Would there be trees right up against the security fence?
Yeah, I was
would
gonna
the-
ask that same question.
Would the fence be the 50 feet away from the, would it be at the buffer line? So,
Look at the site
or would it
plan.
have to be beyond that further? So it could allow for a strip of mowing, so there would not be trees right up to the fence.
Scott or Marty, any comment on the relationship between the fence and the watershed
Sure.
protection buffers?
The fence is, is on, the buffer is on the project side of the buffer for sure. And in most cases far, well more than 50 feet away. And to Melinda's point, I think a lot of times when projects, require a permanent demarcation, like along the buffer, whether it's a split rail fence or some stones or something like that, it's usually in an area where you want to make sure people just aren't sort of wandering into that area, or their lawn mowing sort of starts to creep into that. And certainly, on this project, that's not going to happen because the people using the project, as she stated, are going to be within this secured area. And the only time, there's some gates to the west for snow plowing, but even those are well more than 50 feet away from any, watershed protection area. So I think, it's basically going to, once everything is revegetated and the vegetation matures, you're going to have, something that really, between that and the fencing, there's not going to be any people just sort of wandering in here and disturbing those buffers by chance.
Are there any maintenance activities planned outside of the fence to keep the fence clear? That's the other piece of this.
This is Jeremy Stevens with the State of Vermont Buildings and General Services. There are no operations and maintenance activities planned outside of the fence. Occasionally, what may occur, and I haven't seen this yet in my short time at BGS, is that there may be a security issue with some growth outside of the fence. And I imagine at that time we would come back to you if we needed to do something more severe than just trimming back.
And so it's that idea of occasional trimming that in the past has been a challenge, because without demarcation, people don't know, how far back can they trim without getting to that watershed protection buffer.
And-
I'm trying to see on here, Melinda, how close
Yeah,
it is. Can you?
so
help
it's
highlight that?
really far back. It's like, it's beyond where the site plan even, let's see. I can, it's
Yeah,
While
just
we're
wanna make
talking
sure that
about
we see
this,
it.
so they would be allowed to trim like a hazard tree in a situation like this, would they be, even if it was in the buffer, allowed to trim like a security threat? It seems like I would assume the answer is yes. Like if there was something that was like allowing people to climb over the fence.
Yeah, something leaning on the fence or, yeah.
Right, so you can see on the site plan that the buffer is way back here. So it's like, I don't know what the scale is on this plan, but Scott, maybe if you could shed some light on
Yeah.
how far
So-
away this buffer is.
So that buffer is 50 feet from the wetland, which is, you can see in
Right.
the line to the west.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
you're looking at, another 80 feet to the
Yeah.
toe grading there.
And on the southern border here, am I reading it correctly that that buffer is pretty close to the fence
That
line?
one is closer. I think we tried to keep like 10 feet off the fence though.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I mean,
Um,
that area along the south is the type of thing that I'm concerned about. Just anytime that the buffer gets pretty close to something that's gonna require maintenance.
mhm,
Unintentionally, things tend to get cleared in the buffer, so that's what we're looking out for.
mhm, mhm.
Where's the fence on this map?
It's this right here.
Might show up better on the site plan.
Yeah, I can't
Okay.
see that.
The
I
trees.
suppose, I guess it seems like an easy thing to just have the buffer demarcated like we do on other plans, even though it's far away. It doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't seem like it's gonna be super difficult to do that or
And there's not
impair.
much of it that's exposed. I
Yeah.
mean, we could say the
Totally.
watershed protection buffer to the south and west, which is just basically from the gravel wetland, south and east around the bottom side. That's the area to me that looks as though it could benefit from demarcation, so that future maintenance and clearing outside the fence you'd be able to see visually where that line is.
I guess I'd be curious what you'd want to see for demarcation. I mean, it doesn't make sense to have another fence behind the fence.
Perhaps boulders could work, and I was thinking the same thing, that it doesn't make sense to
Yeah.
have another fence.
Yeah, sometimes, those work really well when you have like, some blasting or cuts on your site and you have a lot of boulders lying around. We're mostly a fill site here.
Okay,
So
yeah, you're building up to make it level.
I'm envisioning trucking in boulders or building a fence behind a fence. And it seems like we're so far away that this is kind of I'm not sure really what we're worried about happening here.
Well, the other part of that, Scott, is it is a security fence. So we don't want to create something that someone can hop up on or prop something on to get over the security fence.
So I just have a quick question. On that previous slide, Melinda, was it that green area that's the fence? That green
No,
line around?
that's the tree line. The fence is, I don't know if you see my cursor, but
It's
it's
like
this
black with hollow
line
dots.
Okay,
that goes around like that.
right.
Yeah, I would.
So a
Do you
fair
have any
amount of the
ideas?
buffer, most of the buffer is outside the fence.
All of it is
Right.
outside the fence,
Yeah,
All
Gary,
of it
yeah.
is.
But how
It's
far
not even
outside?
really close. It's
Yeah.
just, it's just that like for consistency, we have, we ask for it to be demarcated on other developments, and it does happen that people frequently unknowingly do maintenance or mow or trim in the buffer because it's, you can't, it's not visible when you're just out there walking around, and it's easy to think like, oh, we're just going to clear a little bit more, blah, blah, blah.
I'm sympathetic to the point, but I feel like if we didn't have a security fence on this project and came in and called the line of our security fence a wetland, a buffer demarcation fence, everyone would be pretty happy.
Yeah.
Melinda,
Maybe just,
Melinda, can you show us where the construction fence is marked on this map that you have up?
Like during construction, like the.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the legend on this one, and there's.
Yeah,
I
so
guess there's a
that's on the
line.
erosion control plans. We have one legend, and
Oh,
then you can refer back to it.
Oh,
maybe just to use something like a 2-foot 4x4 or, something very minimal that nobody's going to be using as a stepping stone to get across the fence. But just every so often, so someone that would be mowing, it would be obvious.
There's no mowing in this area.
Can we just, could we just, instead of asking for the demarcation, Melinda, could we write language about what could happen outside the fence? So essentially, I think that last comment that like, if the fence itself was used as like the wetland demarcation, that would be fine. The issue for us is that that's not what it is. And it's conceivable that somebody would do maintenance on the other side of the fence. Whereas if it was like the wetland demarcation, people would only do maintenance on the other side of it if there was a hazard tree or some threat like that, right? So could we like write a recommendation that would essentially say, even though the buffer is not close to the fence, maintenance will only, the applicant should only, in order to protect the buffer, the applicant should only conduct maintenance on outside the fence if it is like a security threat or like some language like that. Is that something that we can write, or is that stretching too much?
That sounds reasonable to me, Kim.
Yep. So there would be a 7 that would say something like, to avoid impinging in the wetland buffer, there should be no cutting or mowing outside the fence unless it represents a hazard or security risk, something like that.
Yeah, I wish I had typed while you were talking, because I think that was
I'm writing it down.
awesome.
No,
I think we'd want to add in maintaining the stormwater management system, because there is some of that outside.
Oh,
of
yeah.
that.
And I'm wondering which buffer you're referring to, that, you've got the little tiny class 3 non-functioning buffers near the project. And then you've got a class 2 wetland and other class 3 wetlands way on the west of the property. I trust you're not talking about doing anything about those.
right. I mean,
What were you asking?
so the class 3 wetlands are not protected for this project.
So why are we, all the wetlands that are close to the project are class 3, so why are we even talking about them?
To the south of the project, it looked like there was an unnamed stream with a buffer. Is that what, am I stating that correctly?
Let me pull up the site plan again.
That's correct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so it's down here.
Melinda, when you have that, if you could just read it back to everyone, that would be great.
Okay. To avoid impacts to the wetland buffer, no mowing and or trimming shall occur outside the security fence, except for maintenance of stormwater infrastructure and maintenance. Yeah, what's the other?
Maintenance to address security
To
threats or
address
hazard.
security
hazard.
hazards.
Sorry, I think we should add plow snow as well. We are plowing snow through the gates of
Through the gates at the west.
Yes.
Good
Well, that
idea.
we would allow that anyway. That's
Okay.
not cutting, so.
We
The
allow
comment is-
snow to, I didn't know we allowed snow to go into wetland buffers. Is that what you're saying?
It does not go in the buffer, it just goes
Oh,
outside
okay.
the fence.
Yeah,
Yeah, outside
Good.
the fence, but not into the wetland buffer.
great.
And
Hello, can I just one comment?
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just a little concerned about the wording of no mowing. I know we're putting some caveats in there, but you know, it's the fence line needs to be maintained. You know, I was kind of thinking more along the lines of language that we would be mindful of those regulations that you're talking about with maintenance staff. You know, if we simply make sure that our maintenance staff is aware of this conversation we're having. You know, we don't plan on putting a 20, 30 foot cut around the fence, but it does need to be maintained.
Yeah,
How
see, I
about-
think this is where the issues come up, right? Like we have this conversation with other applicants in other situations, and it sounds like this is a great plan. What happens is over time, the mowing gets bigger and bigger. People you can't see where the line is in real life. And so people unwittingly mow into the buffer by accident. And so that's why we require some demarcation so that the staff doesn't accidentally mow into the buffer. And I think I think that if you were suggesting the fence is going to essentially act as the demarcation and we're going to do almost nothing, very little, except in the instances where we have to like deal with a pressing issue on the other side of the fence, then I don't strongly see the need for demarcation. But if there is going to be regular mowing, then it introduces the possibility that the thing that we are trying to protect against, like the reason that we make this recommendation to every applicant is actually happening. Then I think like boulders should be put in place, because that's exactly the type of scenario that we're trying to protect against, is like the maintenance staff doing their job and accidentally mowing into the buffer.
Can I have a suggestion? I think you're correct. I think you got to be able to mow on both sides of the fence. Otherwise, you're going to get trees growing into the fence. You're going to have all kinds of problems. But it just looks like there's a couple little areas that might be outside the fence, but in the buffer. Maybe we say not to exceed 10 feet or something like that. Just because I think you're correct that to maintain a fence, you have to be able to mow on both sides.
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable. That's what I was thinking as well. Just if you want to put a foot limit on it, go ahead and do that. It's just maintaining the line there and being, you know.
I think Kim is right that there needs to be something. So, you know, if they do, you know, the state has to bring in boulders to demarcate that on the south side and the west side, then that, so be it. That's, you know, there needs to be something there. Because over time, you know, people change.
Yeah.
The word doesn't get through to, you know, new folks, new maintenance folks.
Unless they're told to simply make sure that the area near the fence is maintained. I can see that as a point. Can we get other people's opinions on this?
I think it just needs to be, when you ask them to throw some boulders along the watershed buffer and be done with it.
That's where I'm at, Eric.
Okay. Okay, that seems to be the general consensus on the commission.
Oh,
So,
can I stop a minute?
Yeah.
Mike, I'm going to refer to Captain Manning. I'm going to refer to you on this, but boulders to me is a security risk. It's just something for someone to hide behind. And I think that we ought to find, if we need to demarc something else, or just put maintenance on the other side of the fence is for security reasons, or maintaining that fence, which is a security reason.
Yeah, I'd probably just say it depends on the size of them and how close they are to the fence.
I don't think they need to be large. It doesn't have to be, I think even in some cases, we have had neighborhoods do like specific plantings. Like you all could decide what demarcation works. It's just really to say like the mowing can't go past this point.
Yeah, but why don't we say, I'll propose a recommendation that the watershed protection buffers along the south and west of the developed area be demarcated with a permanent physical structure. It can be fencing, it can be boulders,
Plant.
whatever makes sense
Yeah.
for your use case, but something that maintenance folks will actually see and clearly know where the watershed protection buffer begins.
It just needs to be something that will keep the lawnmower, the brush hog, or whatever out of the watershed buffer.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Could we work with staff to identify the limits of that? Because I mean, surely there's some areas here that are so far away, we don't need to do
Yeah, that's why I said south and west, because the whole northern border doesn't look like it's anywhere near.
Right. But,
any of
but
it.
even on the west side, there are areas here that are hundreds of feet from where we're doing any work.
It seems to me that the only place where the tree line may conflict with the fence is along the south border of the fence.
That's actually true. I hadn't noticed that the areas that are close on the west are with the gravel wetland area. So I'd be fine amending my recommendation suggestion to be just along the southern border.
But again, we don't plan on mowing that. There's really no way to get a mower there. And we're required to screen that area due to the neighbor to the south. So we're really not interested in touching that at all. In terms of security, Captain Manley can speak more on this, but imagine that is, we just need to be able to see the fence, put it on camera, be able to play that tape back, and if something were to happen. But I don't really think there's too much else we can do there. That tree line is so close to the fence that if you were to put a permanent or temporary physical structure, it's probably going to impinge or at least provide some sort of access over the fence.
So do you plan on, because that tree line's so close, would they be also a security risk because they are so close, or are they just far enough away?
Captain Manley and I actually haven't spoke about this, so we're kind of winging it right here in terms of what maintenance would look like. The way my conversations with O&M have gone are if there is vegetation that is impacting the fence, pushing it over, or causing you're breaking your line of sight so that you can't see the fence, then that would require some sort of maintenance. Captain Manley, is there anything else needed there?
Yeah, no, I'm not super familiar with the amount of space we're talking here, but I mean, if we were to line, like what size boulders would be acceptable? I hate to get down in the weeds, but I'm trying to put this to rest.
So the spirit of what we're trying to do is just something that can't easily be moved. You can imagine somebody goes out to do maintenance. You know, if it's a 1x1 boulder, somebody can easily just push it out of the way and continue to do things closer to the watershed protection buffer area. So what we're trying to do is just something that's not easily movable, and will permanently mark it so that over time there's not accidental encroachment.
Yeah, I'm okay with wording saying to the south side, we will, come up with a permanent demarcation mechanism, and we'll figure out what makes the most sense and not impinge on security. I don't think. Yeah. If everyone's good with that, just and then put some examples in that sentence saying boulders, trees, any other examples that you can put in there.
Yeah, boulders, trees, fencing. Yeah. It's in the spirit of it that you can work out later with staff what makes sense for your site, but it just needs to be permanent.
Yeah. And I mean, it looks like since you have a tree line already, maybe you could use some of that for that purpose.
But I was actually going to add something similar to that. Is the tree line and the buffer are so close to the south fence, that you're going to have something right next to the fence. And so maybe the fence is that demarcation. As this conversation started, it seems like you might have a bigger risk to the east, south of the public parking area, where there isn't a fence.
Oh.
And I think that the state would be definitely open to that, right? Since we're already putting a fence up on the southwest side of the lot, and that's so close to the buffer that seems to work pretty good as a demarcation. But adding something to the south of the public parking area might best suit what it is you're trying to achieve.
Linda, can you read back what you have so far for the recommendation I proposed?
Yeah, so, I mean, right now, it sounded like you were leaning towards sort of the standard recommendation of watershed protection buffers shall be permanently demarcated on the ground or along the south side of the fence with boulders, trees, or fencing.
Let's say south side of the developed area, which would include parking lot and fenced area.
Of the developed area of the, yep.
That would include the parking area and along the fence.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's pretty standard for what we asked for, and I'd like to see if there's a second, if there's support for that recommendation from other commissioners.
I mean, what about also the idea of, if we're going to say that this security fence is going to be part of the demarcation, what about, just to make it perfectly clear, requiring some signage put on that fence, just stating, that maintenance, or, that something about not impacting the buffer, or just like maintenance will be the absolute minimum, to ensure the security of the fence, or something like that. I don't know. If you're going to use that security fence as the buffer, just make it clear what part of the function of that fence is.
You're saying something to the effect of this fence represents the
watershed protection
buffer line.
The watershed protection buffer.
I feel like this is what we were talking about earlier, and I was on board with that. And then it sounded like there was potentially going to be like more mowing on the other side. So I think I'm not totally clear on, like, Nicholas, can you please not whistle? Thank you. I'm not totally clear on like how much mowing there might actually be on that other side of the fence. I think if it's minimal, then what you're suggesting totally works, Melinda.
Yeah, I think a sign that says the fence on the south side is the watershed protection buffer, and minimal upkeep should be allowed south of this fence to maintain the security of, for security, and so that there are no hazard trees that'll fall on the fence or something like that. What do other commissioners think of that idea, as Melinda is writing something else down?
Yeah, I think signage on the fence probably would help.
All right.
It doesn't address the parking area is the only thing. So the area of the parking that's near the buffer would need to be physically demarcated still.
Yeah.
So
that's to the south side.
So it might need, go ahead, Melinda, you probably have a revised.
Yeah, so watershed protection buffers shall be permanently demarcated along the south side of the development. the security fencing can serve as
The demarcation.
part of this demarcation, but shall have signage installed to denote that the fence serves to demarcate something. I mean, it's
Yeah.
too wordy right now, but basically it needs to have signage explaining that it also demarcates the watershed protection buffer, and that you know, that the maintenance should be kept to an absolute minimum to protect the watershed, to protect the buffer. And then maybe in a separate recommendation stating that the south, the remainder of the south side of the site shall be demarcated with additional fencing, boulders, or something like that.
Like, or other suitable means, something
Or
like
other
that would be.
suitable means.
Yeah, that should be pretty easy along the, the parking area.
good
So
with that,
here's
Linda.
a
Thank you.
question kind of related to this, but it just popped up in my mind. So I want to ask it. We talked about doing site visits at a previous meeting and kind of rotating that responsibility. So in this case, I don't know, it might give you more information to actually go out there and look at it. So if anybody is interested in doing a site visit here, sounds like maybe the Mizuzin project is not as, not quite so critical, but I don't know, would that be something of interest to actually go out and look at it?
Possibly. Were you thinking we would do it during one of our meeting times?
I'm thinking that somebody could volunteer to go out and do a site visit.
On their own?
Yeah, as was suggested. I think maybe it was Reed who suggested that that we kind of alternate doing site visits, and one or two commissioners go out and do that site visit and report back. In this case, we have time to do that before these recommendations are transmitted to the DRB, because the meeting is not until October 26th.
Can you put the recommendations back up on the screen, Melinda? I'm just trying to see whether, I don't want to have to ask, our guests today to return to another meeting unless we feel like a site visit is required to nail down the recommendations. Not saying that a site visit isn't a good idea anyway, but I'm not sure that it would change our recommendations in this case.
It's mainly this recommendation around the, I guess around the, well, and that might be hard to see in a site visit where
Yeah, that's what I
construction
was
limits
thinking.
haven't been marked and all that. So.
Yeah, I think I would probably be walking around kind of confused about where things were.
Yeah, I agree.
All right.
So we have 6 plus the one that we are adding
Or
related
2.
to the watershed protection buffer.
It's
Yeah.
taking the place of 3, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, 3 can probably stay there, but maybe add 2, 3, or separate recommendations to follow 3. So watershed protection buffers must remain in natural vegetation, must be clearly demarcated on the site plan. Watershed protection buffers shall be permanently demarcated along the south side of the developed area.
What if we just say by means determined to not risk safety? Like, I don't know. Like, what if we specifically say that the state has the ability to like choose a means of demarcation that doesn't affect safety or security.
That sounds like a good idea. They can,
Yeah, and I like that as long as we provide examples. For example, physical barriers such as fencing or boulders or signage along security fences.
And that's why I asked for the other suitable means, because it gives us a little flexibility.
Mhm.
I even think that on some neighborhoods, haven't folks used like small, like I'm thinking, I feel like in some neighborhood site plans, I've seen folks use like pretty small bushes, like, is that accurate, Melinda? Like things like snow mound spirea or like that someone couldn't hide behind.
Yeah, I mean,
Despite the
probably have
fact that this child definitely tries to hide in snow mound spirea.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the means of demarcating the buffer with plantings, as you suggest.
can we just put that in there as one of the possibilities?
Watershed protection buffers shall be permanently demarcated along the southern part of the southern border of the development with boulders, trees, fencing, boulders, plantings, or fencing. Boulders, plantings, fencing, or some other
Or signage, can we put, or signage on the
boulders,
existing fence?
boulders,
think-
plantings, fencing, signage, or some other means that will not interfere with the security of the site or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, Zoltan, Marty, and Scott, how does that sound?
I think that's reasonable from our point of view.
Agreed.
Agreed. We'll have to discuss it, Cap Manley.
Okay.
Okay, do any commissioners have any other comments on the recommendations for this permit?
Not on the recommendations, but I just have a question about the fencing. So is
Go
this
ahead.
okay, time to ask. Okay, so we're talking about fencing, and this project happens to be right in the, you know, core habitat, wildlife habitat crossing area. And so is this fence going to be around the entire project, or just the three sides and the front is sort of open? And will this act as like a trap to animals that do use that as a, you know, a path to go from one side? And what happens if an animal does get trapped in the fencing? Is there any way to let that animal continue on? Is there any openings where you can, you know, shepherd out an animal that gets trapped in the fencing?
The site's completely enclosed, so the only way through into the fence is through gates. So
So even the general public would have to be able to go through.
that's good. So the general public can go into the building through an area that is not fenced, but then the area that's fenced is a closed polygon. There's no way inside that fence without going through a gate.
Right,
Melinda,
that's the purpose of it, right? Is to keep
That's right.
things out.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the dark shaded area at left, Terry, with the storage building. And there's a gate.
Okay, so the public parking is open, but everything around, I just can't see where the fence is.
Yeah, it's hard to see on the small screen, but even through the public parking, you would then have to go through, there's a gate right where the pavement necks down to get into the storage area.
Okay, so wildlife would be diverted.
There's really no
to-
way for them to wander in, and the fence is very high. I don't think a deer can jump it.
Okay,
Plus, I think people are probably going to be around
Right.
quite often.
and later.
So, all right. Can,
I'd
anything
like to
else?
make-
Oh, yeah.
I'm ready to make a Laura.
Okay, thank you, Reed.
Well, I've got a
Go ahead,
couple of
Carl.
other questions. And one is, I'm unclear on where the location of the proposed park and ride is in relationship to this property. Number one, and number two, I'm also unclear from the maps exactly where the driveway or the road into this whole project is and what that's and how that and what it's going to do to the traffic pattern.
I can speak to that. So the park and ride is north of our parcel, so off the top of the page. And so the access to both projects, because it's a shared access off of 2A, is right where Melinda's cursor is, up the lower right-hand corner of the page. So cars come in, they turn right to go to the park and ride and to the employee parking of our project, or they go straight through into the public parking.
Okay, so it's just one curb cut there, and where is that in relationship to the Hurricane Lane entrance?
South. It's south. We're probably, let's see, I could think we're probably like 800 feet or so.
Okay, so that's a separate curb cut into this from Hurricane. And is there going to, and what about traffic control? Are there going to be lights there or?
So this project was accounted for in the V-Trans traffic study that they did for the park and ride. So, I think that is a controlled intersection, but all of the traffic from our project was accounted for in their study.
In other words, V-Trans is really the one that is handling the access for both sites. So the access is being reviewed under the V-Trans Park and Ride project.
So it's like our project is basically being accessed from a private road in turn,
I see. Okay, so your project itself doesn't really have anything to say about access.
That's right, because it's basically piggybacking on another project and is accounted for.
And how far north of your project is the proposed park and ride?
It is,
It's just the parcel north of it,
it is from
right here.
from the employee parking lot to the parking lot for the park and ride's about 650 feet,
Okay,
just off the page.
great. Well, thank you for.
You're welcome.
If everyone is ready, Reed, if you could make your motion.
I'll move approval of the discretionary permit with the drafted recommendations.
A second.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the drafted recommendations for this discretionary permit signify by saying aye.
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 Does anyone abstain? And are there any nays? All right, so thank you everyone for your time. These recommendations as drafted have been approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks.
Thanks all.
Commissioners, I have to go get Nico ready for Audubon. I will see you all at our next meeting.
He needs whistling lessons.
Yeah.
Yeah. He needs whistling.
He's got untapped talent.
Yeah. He also just needs like sit and color lessons.
Good luck.
No, I'm just kidding. He's a great kid. Okay, I'll see you all in 2 weeks. Oh, wait, one thing. This is related to Catamount, sort of. There's a cyclocross race happening at Catamount this weekend. Everyone should come and watch. It's going to be super fun and exciting, and it's happening at our beautiful town forest, and it's going to be a great community event, and there's going to be a beer garden and food truck, and the women's pro race is going to be spicy. Georgia Gould, who has an Olympic bronze medal, is coming, and so you can come watch her ring my bell.
What day?
Favorite, so you're not favored to win, Kim?
I am not favored to win. No.
Kim.
Georgia
Go,
will
Kim, go.
certainly win.
what day
And
and
there's
time?
free kids racing, so bring your kids. All the kids get Ben and Jerry's pint coupons. There's
You
like
could have
a
an
course.
equipment malfunction. You could win, Kim.
So Kim,
Yes.
day and time?
That's a great question. So it's Saturday. The way that that cyclocross racing works is that everybody doesn't race at once. So there's categories. So the lower categories race in the morning. I think the first race is at 8 a.m. And then the elite races are later in the day. So I think women's elite goes off at like 2 p.m. If you want to watch Georgia, that's when to show up. And then the final race of the day is at 4:20, and that is the single speed race. So if you want to watch people not be able to shift, that's when to watch that. And trying to think what else. Yeah, there'll be food. We bought like 400 cider donuts and apples that were that will just be by donation. Lawson's is going to be selling beer. We have a food truck coming. The weather is supposed to be great. Catamount is really beautiful right now, so it should be, I think, a fun day. And the course is really spectator friendly. Ben designed it in a way that you can like see a lot of the course from different points. So
Where's
even
everybody?
little kids with scoop bikes, there'll be a course for them. So if you have a kiddo that's like really teeny tiny.
Mommy, I thought you should show them these.
And Nico also wants everyone to see his collection of horse chestnuts.
They're ginormous.
Nice. Where are they parking everybody for that race?
The McCulloughs are letting us use the old skating oval for overflow parking.
Okay.
I was gonna say the watershed protection buffer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the watershed protection buffer.
I suspect there will be a lot of parking on the road, but whatever.
Yeah, there may be a lot of parking on the road. I really don't know. That happened for that high school cross country meet, but I think that Ben has had some pretty explicit conversations, and the map they made has overflow parking listed on the old skating oval, and I know the McCulloughs have said it's okay to do that.
Yeah.
So I encourage everyone to come out. I think it should be a fun community event. You can like come and sneakily talk to people about birding there and get folks excited about the conservation aspects of the property.
Cool.
All right.
Is this mostly on the south side? Is that where that happens?
Entirely on the south side, yeah. So cyclocross is really different than other types of off-road racing. First of all, and that people really only do it racing. Like people don't just like go cyclocrossing for fun. It's basically just a race scenario, unlike mountain biking or road biking or gravel. And the way it works is that there's a short loop, and they time the first couple laps, and then they figure out how many laps it would take to get to 50 minutes or an hour, and they put up lap cards. So when you start, you don't know how many laps you're going to do. And there are practice cyclocross races on Wednesday night. And so if you wanted to like get an idea of what it was going to be like on Saturday, you could come tonight. But yeah, it's a short, like maybe 2-mile loop just on the south side. All right, Nico obviously needs my attention, so
Thank you, Kim.
I'll see you all later. Yes.
Bye.
All right. The next thing on our agenda is the significant wildlife habitat area and public outreach. And I know we've talked about, if you could put up the map, Melinda. And I know we've talked about public outreach, and we've talked about a survey. And go ahead, Melinda.
Yeah, go ahead.
But I was just wondering, I guess in my own mind, I need to understand the reason behind a survey, and what
I
people
might
were
be able
thinking.
to,
Okay,
yeah, and I might be able to speak to that if you want me to give it a shot, Melinda, based on what we talked about earlier this year.
yeah, go ahead again, Reed, because yeah.
Yeah, so we did all this work with Jens. We've got this draft map. The objective is to adopt this map by providing it to the planning commission for inclusion in the next town plan. Is that correct, Melinda? Am I on track so far?
Or it could be an amendment to, well, I guess if it was gonna be for the next town plan, we'd have to wait until that process was underway.
Okay,
And
or we could suggest an amendment to the current town plan to add
yeah, right.
the updated
And-
map.
And I guess it would be an amendment to the town plan and to the bylaw, because this would also serve as a regulatory map.
Right,
Um,
and we haven't had a chance yet to actually talk about bylaw language. We talked about,
Right.
What we would name these different tiered, the different tiers in our SWHA classifications and stuff.
Mhm.
But we haven't actually taken a look at draft language to amend the bylaw around this. But the reason for something like a story map and survey is because this is actually a pretty significant change in mapping and policy that'll impact people previously not impacted so much. And so we want to get public input, especially from those who would be, whose land would be falling within the primary, secondary, and
Mhm.
third tier for prioritization, and get their input on maybe even potential bylaw language. So that's my backstory on why we are at the next steps of talking
Mhm.
about education and input from the public.
So it sounds, go ahead, Melinda.
Did anybody get a chance to look at the story map? Because that's one way of kind of doing, getting public input, is to put out this and sort of explain the reasons for doing what we're doing, giving people some background. And then,
My only comment about it, Melinda,
Yeah.
other than the fact that it is awesome, is I think it would be most effective combined with a survey, so that maybe the last section of the story map is,
yeah,
here's where you can provide your feedback. I know it says at the bottom that you can reach out to provide input.
yeah,
And the other thing is, I thought that it was very educational, but I didn't think, and this is mostly due to the fact we haven't talked about bylaw amendment language,
mhm,
but it didn't speak much to anticipated impacts to landowners in town.
mhm,
And I thought that would be something that would be good to be more clear about. Basically, some sort of statement that says the revised SWHA map and bylaw language is anticipated to impact develop in the town in this way.
Mhm.
Properties that fall within tier 1, if they were to come up for subdivision or further development, would likely experience XYZ, right? Giving some examples, and that would, I think, elicit more useful feedback on a survey.
Yeah, I agree. And so it sounds like before this is even put out, that we should work on drafting some language.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
But what you've done is amazing and is a great start.
Mhm.
yeah, I think I agree. This is a really cool tool, Melinda. I guess it's a couple of minor comments or suggestions would be if we can, at the top of the story map, right around where Williston's landscape is changing, that or something, you can put a, I don't know what you want to call it, but like a flag or something to a note to flag to visitors that there is, at the end, there is this survey that's going to be coming, or scroll, at the end of the story map is a next steps kind of thing, just for people who maybe don't make it all the way through the map, so they don't miss the next steps. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah,
That one
maybe
through.
maybe at the very beginning, just like above this section, I can include another section that just says, this is, the purpose of this is to explain a process that the Conservation Commission is undergoing to revise the map and the bylaws. At the end of this story map, there's a survey for you to give some feedback or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Love that idea, Eric.
The other very minor comment I had is down in the credits. We have years for those first two publications, the Keeping It All, Finding It All publications. I think that might be useful for context for people who aren't familiar with them.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
And if they're online, you provide links to those reports too.
They should be linked, not here, but yeah, I guess I could link them here as well, but throughout the story map, they are linked.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw that
Yeah.
when they were first mentioned, they were linked. Yep. While you were working on this, I was working on edits to the annual report, and I came up with 5 sentences, and you put together a whole storyboard. I was like, well, that's embarrassing.
No. Okay. So maybe it sounds like maybe we'll get a better idea of what specific questions to ask once we look at possible draft language. And South Burlington is in the process of amending their natural resource protections, so I can take a closer look at that, and if any of that is useful, maybe I could borrow their language. If it's any less confusing than I thought it was when I originally read their draft regulations.
One other, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
One other idea is to ask Jens to review the storyboard and provide any story map and provide any input based on what he's seen work well for getting responses from the public or quality responses. I'm sure that they did some sort of outreach in other towns he's worked with, and he may have a couple suggestions that could enhance the story map or enhance our survey.
Well, I thought what you did was brilliant, Melinda, and in particular, I thought it was very helpful and useful to have the whole historic story of how this has evolved over the years. Great job.
Thank you. I'm trying to think. One question I have is related to road crossings, because that's something new, completely new, that we haven't had
Protection
in our
of
regulatory maps.
road crossings.
Yeah, and just kind of wondering, and maybe this is a question for Jens, is that are there regulations related to road crossings that we should be looking at?
Yeah, like, is
Um,
it an FYI for us, or is it something that should be regulated
Yeah,
to protect
and,
them?
right, and it's not so much the crossing structure itself, because that can't really be regulated, I don't think.
It's the habitat on either side.
It's correct, yeah, it's the habitat on either side, and maybe, yeah, I'm not sure, but if you have any thoughts on that, I'd be interested to hear them.
Well, the only thing that comes to mind to me is whether on those areas, or at least the more critical of those areas, are the way we want to put signage along the road.
Oh,
Sort of like moose crossing signage that you
Mhm.
see.
Yeah, who
Mm.
decides whether Animal Crossing signage goes up, Melinda?
Bruce Hoare, and I can tell you right now that he's never going to put it up.
I think
It-
Jens did say that it isn't all that effective. Sometimes,
Right. he did.
personal, signage is much more effective, but
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have the answer today, Melinda, but I do, I have been thinking too, that when we look at the bylaw amendment language, we should at least take a stab at what it could look like to regulate the road crossings,
Mhm.
similar to the SWHA blocks.
how many did there turn out to be, road crossings that he identified? Or you guys?
I feel like somewhere it said,
It was like 100 or
131, yeah.
100 and something.
Yeah, I know that
crossings,
you
but
two went over the map a little bit.
oh, did I not put in here significant road crossings? It doesn't say, 100 something, 130. Sounds vaguely familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Mm.
quite a few, and they're not all tier 1 road crossings, and so that's where,
Yeah.
when we look at the regulatory language, we can be strategic about looking at, does it make sense to regulate against all tiers or just against tier 1, or
Mm.
how do we balance that?
Eric put something up in the chat.
Yeah, so this, it's sort of connects into what we're talking about. I was actually just preparing myself for when we move on, but since we're there, I couldn't remember if Jens had brought this up in any of our meetings or not, but I was in a meeting with a guy from the U.S. Forest Service a few weeks ago, and he gave us a presentation on this program that the Forest Service has, and also sent us this link that this webpage that they put together. I just thought it might be a useful tool. I'm not sure if maybe the towns aren't using it. But, like I said, it doesn't directly apply to this conversation, but some information in it might be useful.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at this. It's been on my mind for a while, but I'll take a look at it and see if there's any information that's applicable to the work that we're doing related to wildlife and wildlife crossings. But there may be also other stuff in there that you're interested in looking at besides that.
Yeah, I was just, I was thinking just from an overall Conservation Commission perspective, there's some really interesting elements in there. Managing invasive plants and hedgerows, roadside ash impacts and things like that.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. That looks really interesting. I'll take a look at that as well. So Melinda, I can't remember what's coming up for our next meeting. When do you think is a good time to look at the bylaws?
Yeah, maybe I can't remember either what's coming up next. I think we may be chatting about operating budget. I think next time CSWD is coming in to talk about some mitigation that they're doing for projects and wetland mitigation. But besides that, it's pretty open. So we could either put it on we could probably put it on next meeting's agenda to at least talk about it for a little bit. And between now and then, I can I'll get some draft language together for you.
All right, that sounds great.
So that end, I had a couple of questions also about future agenda items. One, I was just wondering about the Emerald Ash Forest strategy or the management plan. I can't remember what we called it. We developed it a few years ago with Bruce. I was wondering if we could get an update on how that's being implemented. Assuming the last update was in a recent meeting, and I'm just forgetting about it.
Yeah, certainly. I can provide some information about that, or ask Bruce to come to a meeting and provide some information. I know that this summer, the Regional Planning Commission conducted an inventory of roadside ash trees, not just street trees, but all over town. So I can at least provide some information from that inventory and kind of show you what was done and what the results were. But definitely I can speak with Bruce and see if he can either come to a meeting or kind of fill me in on what's been going on and what the plans are.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Melinda. Is that what all the trees that were removed in Pleasant Acres along Mountain View? Is that what that project was?
Most likely, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Eric, to get an update on that. And maybe if it's easy to find, Melinda, just send us a copy of that plan that we worked on a few years ago, just so we can review that and understand what we thought should have been done, at least at the time.
Yeah. I can send you a link to that.
Great.
Another thought I had, something that came up in today's conversation about the State Police Barracks project, was on porous pavement. And I feel like whenever we propose or ask about feasibility for porous pavement, there's always the standard response is soils do not support porous pavement. And I should know this, but I feel like I never been educated enough on porous pavement to know whether or not the answer that we're getting is a solid answer, or if it's just a canned answer and the applicant is supposed to feel like dealing with it. So I'm wondering if we could get a presentation from Christine or someone else to educate us on when porous pavement is actually an appropriate tool to use.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And maybe even be as bold as to suggest that they apply it in a small area. And I mean, does the state have data that it doesn't work, or are they just going? I think part of it is how well drained it is underneath, and
yeah,
issue. Yeah.
What is porous pavement? I don't know what that is.
Porous pavement is a tool that's used in stormwater management, and it's just like it sounds. It's pavement, either asphalt or concrete, that is porous. It has holes in it and allows rainfall and stormwater to infiltrate through the road surface or parking lot surface and into the ground underneath, rather than creating an impervious layer like most standard pavement is, and dealing with the stormwater, if you're going to deal with it, at the end of the slope, creating directing into a ditch or a swale or whatever. It's expensive, sort of, depending on how you factor in costs and over the long term. And it is applicable only in certain situations. It's not a universal tool, but I feel like whenever we propose it, the standard response is that the soils don't support porous pavement. And I just don't know enough to know whether or not we should push harder on that, or if it's true that the Williston soils in Williston, generally speaking, just are too clayey or loamy or whatever, and there's no sand there to allow for infiltration.
Is there any examples close porous pavement?
Yeah, there's down in Burlington is the nearest example that I'm aware of. Down at Echo, on the waterfront, there's some forest pavement down there and the little mini traffic circle thing out in front of Echo. The state did do a test case pilot study kind of thing at the park and ride down on exit 4, I think, in Randolph, at the right off of 89 interchange there. And that didn't, my understanding is that didn't work out very well because the underlying soils were not porous enough.
Yeah, I think there's some issues with maintenance too, keeping them from clogging. They have to be like vacuumed out periodically and you know, a good
Yeah, the
way.
more-
So
I was just gonna say that I missed the beginning of this topic, but it sounds like we're talking about the porous pavement thing, and the most effective things I've seen are in my travels are places where there's not much plowing and application of salt and stuff. I've seen a lot better success with it, and even with non-pavement, with just like pavers that have room between them for infiltration and stuff. But Vermont is a tough environment, and it seems like everybody we talk to says, yeah, we haven't seen anybody be able to require it effectively or implement it effectively.
Yeah, the one positive for what I'm trying to say, there's one forest pavement application, which is actually on the south end of Lake George along Beach Road. It's about a half a mile or so long. And that works really well. I've talked with the engineers for that project, and it's been successful. They actually did it, and they did like the first quarter mile, and then that worked. So they added another quarter mile to the project a few years later. But the engineer actually told me, he said, this stuff is difficult to work with. You need to there's a lot of technical specifications that you need to follow to make sure it's installed correctly, otherwise it doesn't work. And that one on the road is called Beach Road for a reason. It's a sand underlying soil structure. So there are some successful applications for it, but I just feel like in general, we need to have a conversation about whether or not we will continue to try to recommend that, and just otherwise give up on it.
Yeah, I agree. It would be good to learn more about that. So we are actually getting close to the end of our meeting, and we haven't done the staff report. I think we should put off the annual report again. We just don't have time to go over it. How quickly can we talk about trail counts, Melinda?
Very quickly. So I've started putting out a trail camera at the entrance to various trailheads or various trails, Five Tree Hill, Sucker Brook, and now Mud Pond Country Park. I've got it set low enough so that it's just, catching people's feet and not, their faces. So that's been interesting.
So can we do an inventory of Birkenstocks versus
right.
and bare feet?
God versus human.
Yeah. So far it seems to be working pretty well, although it does take time to actually go over the photos and scrap the ones where it's not really catching anything, and I don't know, just kind of figure out from that what the trail counts are.
Or the kid running circles around the camera.
Yeah, right. But one interesting thing is that it's also capturing the number of dogs. So like captures dogs really well. So that's kind of interesting piece of information that we could get. The other announcement I have is that tonight from 5:30 to 7:30, the Department of Recreation is hosting a outreach on the future of Allenbrook Park as part of its process of developing a master plan for recreation. So if any of you can go to that and attend it, it could be interesting. Anyway.
Is that at the school, Melinda, the Allenbrook
Yeah,
School?
it's at the Allenbrook School.
And is it outside or it goes?
It's outside.
Pretty.
Yep.
Do you know, Melinda, I won't be able to make it. Do you know if there'll be follow-up opportunities to provide comments on that?
Oh, yeah, I'm pretty sure that there will be. Yeah,
Yeah, the email said there would be at least one more opportunity to provide public input.
yeah. Anyway, so encourage you to go to that if you can, or go to part of it.
Thank you, Melinda. Thanks.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Well, I think that it's just past 9, so I'm going to adjourn this meeting.
Gonna
I
be
hope,
68 and sunny in October today, everybody. Get outside.
oh
Mhm,
yeah, it's beautiful out there, and enjoy the long weekend.
mhm.
So,
Yeah,
okay, thanks.
okay. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.